What's going on, everyone? Bass here. In today's video, I'm going to be doing something a little different. So today I'm going to be going over PFF grades for the entirety of preseason, who did really good and who did really bad. I figured why not make a video about these PFF grades, because this is something I do on my free time anyways. I love going over and analyzing certain PFF grades for certain players and all that. So basically, I'm going to be going over the winners throughout the entire preseason when it comes to PFF grades on offense and defense, and then also the losers when it comes to PFF grades on offense and defense. All right, so before we go into the all three games combined grades for players, I want to touch back on the Bills game real quick since that game just happened, and I'll jump right into it. And firstly, I want to talk about linebacker Isaiah McDuffie, our 6th round draft choice out of Boston College there. He was our highest graded player against the Bills, 79.5 overall, including an 87.6 pass rush. Now, he was targeted 3 times and did allow 3 receptions for 21 yards. And then also 2 other linebackers, Ray Wilburn and Dejon Harris, also played well. 75.0 for Wilburn and 78.0 for Dejon Harris. And as I said in my 53 prediction, there is a slight chance Ray Wilburn could end up making this team. More likely than not, he's going to be a practice squad linebacker, but there is still that off chance. Someone who played a lot better than last week was safety Innis Gaines. As you see here last week, that 40.8 against the Jets ramped that way back up to a 72.3 against the Buffalo Bills, probably his best game of the preseason. Now, he did allow 3 catches and he also missed 2 tackles. Jack Heflin with another nice game, bringing in a 70.8 rating, including a 73.7 run defense grade. And I've talked about him. I fully think Jack Heflin will be that undrafted free agent to make the roster this year. There could be multiple if you talk about, Innis Gaines and Uphoff potentially, but I think Jack Heflin will be that guy to make the roster as an undrafted free agent. And then to wrap up the defense for the Bills game, someone who we all saw had a pretty terrible game. It was pretty easy to see. Isaac Yiadom overall just really hasn't had a good preseason at all with the Packers. Brought in a 39.7 grade, including a 43.6 coverage grade against the Bills. Weirdly enough, his best grade and his best game this year was as a Giant in week 1 with that 68.7. I mean, last game, he allowed 6 receptions for 74 yards and a touchdown. Pretty much solidified that he wasn't going to make the 53. I didn't think he was going to anyways. I have Kayvon Ento there. Kayvon Ento didn't have that great of a game either, but I still think he's our 6th corner there. But overall, trade just didn't work out. I didn't expect much from it to begin with, so I'm not really that shocked. Moving over to the offense for the Bills game, 2 guys that have had a really, really good preseason, one of which being Royce Newman, that 91.2 offensive grade for this game against the Bills, including an 88.2 run block grade, definitely his best game this preseason. And then secondly, over here, we have Malik Taylor. Again, his best game of the preseason, grade-wise, PFF grade-wise, with an 85.1 grade and 5 receptions for 69 yards. Bronson Kafusi and Yosh Nijman also had some pretty good games, specifically in the run blocking department. Kafusi with an 81.4 overall grade and an 85.3 run block grade, and then Nijman with a 76.4 overall grade and a 82.1 run block grade. So both tight ends, Jace Sternberger and DeGuara, had pretty bad games against the Bills. Now, DeGuara only had 8 snaps, so I'm not really going to chalk that up as much, but Sternberger had 38 snaps and brought in a 46.8 overall grade here with a 47.4 pass grade. His pass block grade, 69.6, not terrible, but overall, just very underwhelming. Jace Sternberger. Now, he is suspended for the first 2 games, so he's not going to be put on the 53-man roster anyways, but who knows what happens after that. All right, so now let's move over to combining all 3 preseason games and talking about the winners on offense when it comes to PFF grades. And number 1, I think, is easily Royce Newman. He was the number 1 PFF graded lineman with at least 40 snaps. You see it here. Last game, he had that 91.2. Overall, a 91.8 offensive grade, including a 75.6 pass block grade and a whopping 90.5 run block grade. And that's with 82 total snaps. He allowed 0 pressures, and he had a pass blocking efficiency of 100. I don't know what it is about the Green Bay Packers and 4th round linemen, but for some reason, they just find these guys and they just turn out to be complete studs. And I know I might be overacting a little bit, and this is just preseason, but the guy looks legit. And I think he is in strong contention to be a starting guard on this team this year. The second player on my list is another player we've been talking about a lot, and that is Malik Taylor. And definitely throughout this preseason and including last game, he definitely secured that 6 wide receiver spot. Now, he ended up not having as much competition as we all thought he would, with Funchess going on IR, then being released. Juwan Winfrey not playing a single preseason game. Equinemius St. Brown not playing a single preseason game. The only real competition he ended up having was Reggie Bagleton, who did put up a nice game against Buffalo, but I still see Malik Taylor being that 6th wide receiver. Overall, he had that 83.8 overall grade, which was 14th best in the NFL for wide receivers this preseason. He caught 14 of 16 targets for a total of 185 yards. Next up on this list, I have 7th round draft choice Kylin Hill, and it just makes me realize, how did all 31 other teams allow Kylin Hill to fall to the 7th round? It just doesn't make any sense to me. Throughout this preseason, a 79.7 overall grade, which was 10th best running back. He had 19 rushes for 64 yards and a touchdown. Also 4 receptions for 40 yards and a touchdown as well. And another thing that was very great was he had a pass block grade of an 81.5 throughout this preseason, which is awesome because if he has to come in for 3rd downs to pass block, if the Packers make him that guy, obviously they lost their main guy that did that, Jamal Williams, this offseason. So tackle Yosh Nijman also had a very solid preseason, an 81.5 overall grade. He only allowed 2 pressures, 1 sack, and he had a 98.2 pass block efficiency, and basically all of that was from left tackle. Now, that 1 sack was that sack in the first game where he lost the edge. Jordan Love got blindsided, fumbled the ball, and ended up hurting his shoulder, but obviously nothing really serious came out of that. But overall, for having to play left tackle and pretty much most of those snaps all preseason, he actually did really well, and he might actually end up making the 53 just because of that. Also to do with David Bakhtiari being hurt, having a guy that can also play left tackle, say, if Elton Jenkins had to slide elsewhere. So now let's talk about the offensive losers when it comes to PFF grades for this preseason, one of which, Jace Sternberger, 52.1 overall. Now, he did catch 5 of his 8 targets for 41 yards and a touchdown, but as I was saying earlier with the Bills recap, this team is stacked with tight end depth. I mean, you have Tunyon and Lewis and DeGuara, who are pretty much roster locks, and the 4th guy, if Sternberger wasn't suspended, would probably come down to Daphne, Sternberger, and Kofusi. But overall, there's a lot of depth here, so with him not being on the roster to start the year, not to say he would be if he wasn't suspended, it's anyone's best guess what they're going to do after those first 2 weeks. He definitely didn't show a lot in this preseason, but he does kind of have that long leash being that 3rd round draft choice, but we saw what happened with Kamal Martin just after only 2 years, and this is Sternberger's 3rd year. What happens with tight ends, sometimes they start to break out in their 3rd year, so hopefully they might give him another chance this regular season, but I think this is definitely a make or break year if he ends up making the roster after week 2. Next up on offense, I have running backs not named Kylin Hill, Dexter Wiliams, and Patrick Taylor. Patrick Taylor had a 52.3 overall grade with a very, very terrible 15.1 pass block grade somehow. 23 carries, 89 yards, and 1 fumble. Overall, just not a great preseason. And then Dexter Wiliams also had a pretty bad grade, right around the same, a 52.5 overall grade. He was a little bit more efficient running the ball, 17 carries for 82 yards, but I think at this rate, everyone knows that Kylin Hill is running back 3. I don't believe the Packers are going to be keeping 4 running back. Whether or not they keep both these guys on the practice squad is anyone's best guess, but just overall, they lost that 3rd running back battle to Kylin Hill. So now let's move over to the defensive side for the winners, according to PFF ratings, and number 1 on the list, I have Henry Black. He was very impressive in this preseason in my eyes. 77.1 overall grade with an 81.6 run defense grade, which was 2nd entirety of NFL safeties, that run defense grade, and an 88.5 tackle grade, which was also 2nd in the entire NFL this preseason for safeties. And I think Henry Black solidified his 53-man roster spot. I definitely see them keeping him and Scott as the 3rd and 4th safety. Now, I don't know if they'll keep a 5th safety. Could be Gaines or Uphoff, but I think they definitely do keep Black and Scott. The dude didn't miss any tackles. Now, his coverage wasn't the greatest, but overall, he was very, very solid in run defense and tackling. Next up on the list, I have Jack Heflin. I talked a little bit about him earlier in this video. 72.9 overall grade throughout the 3 games. Just a very solid defensive line in the trenches this preseason. 6 tackles, 5 stops. He should make the 53 as an undrafted free agent. Now, there is a chance he couldn't, and if that happens, he might not even make it to our practice squad. A team might snatch him up, but I would really like to see Jack Heflin make this 53. I think he has the upside, the potential. And it possibly could happen where he makes a 53 over Tyler Lancaster if they decide to cut him and save a little bit of money. Jack Heflin definitely has more upside than Tyler Lancaster. And lastly, for the defensive winners, I have Isaiah McDuffie, who was the highest graded player in that Buffalo Bills game. Now, he did only play 2 games. He didn't play that week 1, but he totaled 87 snaps, and he got an overall grade of 79.8, which was the number 1 grade as a defender for the Packers, with an 87.6 pass rush grade, and that was 7th for NFL linebackers throughout the preseason. He had 1 sack, 8 tackles, 5 stops, and only 1 missed tackle. Now moving over to the defensive loser side when it comes to PFF grades. Firstly on this list, I have defensive lineman Tyler Lancaster. Now, he was the worst graded defensive lineman for Green Bay this preseason with a 44.7. Now, grain of salt, that was only 1 game and 10 snaps, so you really can't take that too much into account. But there is still a chance he could get cut, and like I said, Jack Heflin make the roster over him, or they could keep both. And then after him, I have Isaac Yiadom, who had a horrible game in Buffalo. He totaled 86 snaps in the 2 games for Green Bay, with a 45.5 overall grade, which is the 7th worst in the NFL for corners with a minimum of 50 snaps, which also included a 43.9 coverage grade. He allowed 7 receptions on 12 targets, 101 yards, and a touchdown with a 113.5 passer rating, and that's only in 2 games this preseason with Green Bay. That's only in 2 games. Like I said earlier, weirdly enough, his best game was against the Giants. He only allowed 1 reception on 6 targets for 9 yards, and then they traded him. But and then he did even worse in Green Bay. So like I said before, just, failed trade, whatever. You didn't give up much. You gave up Josh Jackson. You were going to probably cut him anyways. So that's all I have for the defensive losers for PFF grading. I would have more, but all the other players that graded low for the Packers this preseason are gone. Kamal Martin graded a 39.9. He got cut. Kadar Holman graded a 43.7. Got traded. Josh Jackson graded a 54.2, who also got traded. So those guys would definitely be part of this list, but they're not on the team anymore. So I guess they kind of are Green Bay defensive losers PFF-wise anyways. So that's about going to do it for today's video. Now, I really do enjoy breaking down PFF grades, and this is definitely something I do on my off time, like I said, so why not make a video about it? In the comments below, would you be interested in this sort of thing after every regular season game? Kind of a breakdown of the PFF grades, who did good, who did bad, and all of that. Just leave that down in the comments below if it's something you'd watch. But on that note, I'll catch you on the next one, and we are so close to week 1 against the Saints, where we get to see Aaron Rodgers and this full football team in full force. So let's go get this thing. And as always, go Pack Go.